So, Dr. Henderson, we're going to go right into some of our submitted questions. So we reached out to some students and staff and faculty on social media and just around campus and said if you had some questions that we wanted to ask Dr. Henderson, not of the strategic plan though, we want to find out, but even so, but we wanted to hear about, the nitty gritty. So here's a question that one of our students submitted, and they asked, did you always want to be a president of the university, or was there another career goal that you had while you were growing up?
So, as I said, I wanted to be an architect, decided I was going to be a teacher, and that's really all I was going to do, is be a teacher, raise 2 kids, which I ended up raising 2 kids, but as I always knew, though, that I wanted to go back and get a doctorate. After I finished my master's degree, I liked teaching high school, but I always knew I kind of wanted to teach on the college level. And so I began to pursue that, and knew you have to have the credential to do it, and was very blessed to be able to work at a good school in Georgia, Georgia Perimeter College. It was a 2-year school, and the thing that I liked about Georgia Perimeter College is that the students that we brought in had all kinds of preparations. I was kind of thinking about this morning. I remember teaching a remedial math class that most of the class was made up of women, and about 90% of them were over 45. They had, and this was at, again, another time in history, they had basically raised their kids and they wanted to kind of go back to college so they could get a degree to get a job. And they were so afraid of math. And I said, well, how many of you have ever bought a car? How many of you have ever bought a house? Or, done any kind of transaction like that? Do you go grocery shopping? I said, you do numbers every day. But one of the things I had to teach them is how to do things as simple as how to add 2 fractions together. But those students went on then to do what they needed to do and graduated from the 2-year school, and then many of them went on to 4-year.
Excellent. So, wow, that's fantastic. We have a staff question right here.
Okay.
All right. So they said that you've traveled all over the world, right, which is true. What has been one of your favorite countries to visit, and why? We don't want an international incident, so whenever people ask what your favorite country is,
this is a tough one. Every country has such remarkable things about it, and so I'm going to answer that a little bit differently.
Okay.
My brother was in the military, and we spent some time in Germany, where he was doing some training, but he also worked in Chad, Africa, Senegal, Africa, and then the Congo. And part of that, I had the opportunity to go to Senegal, which was an incredibly amazing country. And it's very dichotomous, very loving people, and yet you would see people when you drive down the street in cars, on carts, on donkeys, or walking, or on their bicycles. And I'm getting ready to go to India, and I will see the same thing. It's a very amazing thing that across this huge world that you have people from so many different backgrounds, but their lives are all the same, and that they value family, they value relationships, and they want to know that what they're doing matters. Right. So that was the cool thing for me. And like I said, whether it's India or whether I've been to Morocco. I went to Morocco, I remember, and had dinner with a family, and one of the things I learned when you go to Morocco and eat in their homes, if you are not completely stuffed by the time you left, they have not accomplished their goal. It was the best food, and I was so full. It's wonderful. Phenomenal. Wonderful.
All right, let's move on to our next question. This one's submitted by staff. This one feels like, I feel like I want to ask this question also. Queens College, where you've been before. So the question is, Queens and Jersey City are both very diverse locations. I'm from Queens. I just want to give you all that prerequisite.
So correct me if I'm wrong here.
That's right. I just want to let everyone know. It's my heart. And so Queens and Jersey City are both very diverse locations. What has been a key difference that you've seen between these 2 diverse cities?
So I think the difference in the 2 cities actually occurs about how the 2 cities got to be. Queens was always, initially, was the farmlands that where they grew things for the people who lived in Manhattan. So what you would find in Queens, and there still is a farm there, so you would find apple orchards. There was a place where they raised pigs. There's all kinds of farms there. And as those got to be moved further and further out Long Island, they began to develop what they call the borough, the area of Queens, and it was the place where immigrants came through. If you were in Queens in the 70s, you were probably, there were a lot of Polish people there, German, African Americans. There had been Irish and Italians there for a long time because they came in the late 1800s. That wave kind of left, and the wave that's there now are Koreans, Chinese, Japanese, Indians, Pakistanis, all the Stan countries. And then you have a lot of, for example, the Korean Jews have moved there. So what you find are these pockets of immigrants who have found a family comes over and then more people come.
Right.
And so I don't ever call it a melting pot because it's a stew. Everybody has their own culture and they celebrate it, which is a lot of fun. Jersey City began as a place where you were also providing things for the city. But this place was mostly a place where things were manufactured or goods were brought in and then sent across the river. As that went on, the manufacturing went away some, as did the transportation because they built the tunnels and the bridges. And this city, I think, has evolved into, again, a place where immigrants come. And you find that even today. If I was to talk about 10 years from now what immigrant population is on the rise here, it would probably be different than what's here today. Because if you were here in the 70s and you were up in Union City, it was all the Cubans. Do you know where the second largest collection of Coptic Christians in the country? Here, in Jersey City. That's correct. And I would also tell you that the Filipino ambassador, I've met with him several times simply because we have a very large Filipino community here. There's a large Indian community here, African American, and then you think about all the people who come from all the Latino countries.
Right.
So, and again, there were the Italians and the Polish and the Irish who came here in the late 1800s also and worked as longshoremen. So it's very much they were similar in that, and it's also that same energy that I think immigrants bring to any place because they just want to get on about business.
All right, get going. I agree. My parents also immigrated to this country, and it's a huge Caribbean population from Haiti. You know, shout out to my Haitian community out there. But yeah, huge Caribbean population. And as you said, we were just saying in the office had a conversation that in Queens, in certain areas, I mean, from a 3-block radius, the language changes from Spanish to English to French
to Yiddish.
To Yiddish, right? I've been working on my Yiddish.
I learned 2 new Yiddish words yesterday.
All right, we're getting there. Slowly but surely we'll get there. The same thing in Jersey City. I mean, I'm a fairly new resident of Jersey City, and that's something that I'm realizing too, is that you can walk from block to block.
And it's all different.
Completely
It's
different.
amazing.
It's fantastic. Absolutely fascinating.
Makes the food great.
I mean, that's even better, right? I mean, I have a new appreciation for Indian food that I never had before, and I mean, now they know me very well. I'm in there. I'm in my Indian cuisine game is steadily rising. Doc, we're gonna go to the next question from a student. What is your favorite book, and do you have a favorite genre of literature?
Oh gosh, so I will tell you, and you probably don't remember this author. There was an author by the name of James Michener who wrote a lot of books, and they were sort of historical novels.
Okay.
He wrote one on the Tower of London, he wrote one on Hawaii, one on Alaska. So I read all of his books and thoroughly enjoyed them. The books that I read now are sort of all over the place. I just finished reading a book called College Unbound, which is someone's look at what they think colleges will look like in the next 10 to 15 years. And it gives you some ideas about what we ought to be doing to get ourselves into that future. I'm reading How We Learn, which is totally fascinating. If you want to learn how to say, if you want to read a book that lets you feel good about forgetting, this is the book to read. Because it's called How We Learn. How We Learn. Because it tells you that the only way you learn is to forget. You're exposed to something in class or you read it and then you forget it. But then if you come back and do it again, then you know it better, and then the third time. Which is why they point out, how it's important to learn something over a period of time.
Right.
It was fascinating. I'm reading that book. What is another book I've read? I read a lot of different. I read a book when I first moved here called The Warmth of Other Suns, which is the story about the migration of the African Americans from the south to the north. It's a fascinating book, really, really good. I'm reading another book by Amartya Sen. I think he's a Nobel Prize winner. And he writes he writes about the economy, but he also writes about the Indian. And I wanted to better understand in the Indian culture and understand what their mindset is. And so that's what this book's called, The Argumentative Indian. So are you a little bit of everything?
Wow. Hodgepodge of books. That's what
Yeah.
I like. I love that. So, I mean, that's a tough thing, I think, to, as you continue to develop, even as students, but even in your professional career, to find the balance of reading things that are going to enhance you professionally and to develop, but also to still find the time to get in some leisurely reading. So that's great. That's great. Let's go to our next question. This one's another one that's a student-submitted question. What is the toughest part, and also what is your favorite part about being a university president?
The toughest part is to make sure you're staying focused on what the big priorities are. There's an old saying is you need to pay attention to the urgent, but you've got to keep the important things moving along. So you don't want to let too much of the urgent to get in the way of the important, so that you can keep the initiatives going. And that takes a good team, and we have a fabulous team here. Absolutely. I'm very excited.
Excellent. And your favorite part?
Oh, all the things you get to do. Your job is never boring.
Right.
Never boring.